IT sector, with the majority of his career spent directly in the IT cybersecurity. And he will help us to take a look at why exposure, resilience, and AI impact should be focus areas in cybersecurity and how they will grow in importance over the course of 2024 and beyond. Please put your hands together for Integrity360 CTO Richard Ford.
Thank you very much, Joanna, and thank you all for attending. Just to echo Matt's words there, so just flick through to the slides. So yeah, thank you very much for attending, and obviously this great location that we've got our conference this year. And it's great to see so many faces of all our customers, partners that have joined us today. We've got an excellent and jam-packed agenda today, full of great content. So much so that I'm relegated to a supporting act this time round, but I will be up a few times. I've got a few different slots coming up. But I get the pleasure of just introducing our topic and focus for today, and actually for the year for Integrity360 that we are going to be focusing on. And we've built our agenda around this topic so we can touch upon each one of these elements. So I'm just going to do a little introduction to them, just as a lightweight intro, just as a taster for what's to come, and call out some of the things to look out for. Before I do that, I just want to, as I usually do when I'm up on stage, really talk through our security first model. Because really this is what underpins how Integrity360 views security and how we talk about it inside the organization, and how we look to try and talk with our customers about security. And really it's about taking our model. Security First is our conference name, but actually it's born out of the model that we use for talking about security. And it's around building an effective security posture for our customers. And really we work in a circular pattern, starting always at the beginning, which is identify and assess. So working with our customers to identify and assess where their gaps are, what threats they face, what their weaknesses are, and only once we understand those things can we start plotting our way through to actually deciding how we're going to protect ourselves as an organization. So having that context, that situational awareness that is critically important to us as security professionals to be able to make that next step. Then we move on to helping to say, well, we understand the threats we're facing, we understand the gaps that we've got. Importantly, we actually understand where our critical assets are, because there's no point doing anything without understanding what's really important to us, so we don't spend time and invest time and effort in trying to secure things that are not important and that are not critical to the business. But once we understand those, we can then start defining what are the controls that we need to put in place and to what level so we can protect our business based upon the information we already have there. And as good as we can build those controls, and budgets aren't infinite, and there's always going to be a way through. Even the largest organizations suffer breaches, but it's not just how you can defend yourself, but it's actually also how you can protect yourself once those initial controls may have been compromised. So making sure that we have an ability in place to be able to detect and analyze events, threats, and activity once they're inside the network. And then once we've done that, we need to be able to respond and recover. And that really is a hugely important part of the process, to make sure that once we've identified it, we've responded to it, contained it, but actually we're on the path to recovery. Actually, that's going to be one of our key topics that we talk about. And I'm going to come back to this model again shortly at the very end to kind of tie it all together as we go. So back to our topic that we're talking about today. So each year we get together as a group of the security leaders and technical experts within Integrity360 to look at what are the important topics and what are the challenges that our customers are facing, what are the changes in the industry, what are the threats, how they evolved, and what do we need to consider to protect ourselves against those. Last year we looked at the impacts of the changes to the environments as we'd moved into the cloud, hybrid working, that loss of visibility. So visibility was very much our core topic. This year, it wasn't easy to be able to pick one single element. So the topics we've picked for this year are exposure, resilience, and the impact of AI, because it's something that can't be not talked about at all. So I'm going to walk through each one of these just to introduce challenges, why we think they're important, why we think they are the hot topics to look at and focus on, and also talk about actually how we're going to address those throughout the day. So we'll start with hot topic number one, exposure. Now, I'm going to start with just a definition to give us some context of what we're looking at in terms of exposure. Being a noun, being the state of having no protection from something harmful. Or an alternative definition is the revelation of something secret, specifically something embarrassing or damaging. So actually, they're actually interconnected as far as I'm concerned, particularly when we look at it from a cybersecurity perspective, because if we have exposure, if we have things that are at danger from things that are unprotected, then we're automatically going to end up into the other definition of exposure, where something secret, damaging, or embarrassing is being released. So that's become critically important for us to be able to protect our organizations by ensuring that we are limiting as much as possible our exposure. So let's just dive down a little bit further, if I can get this clicker to work, into exposure, and look at actually the challenges. So what are the challenges that we face as organizations? Why is exposure critically important to us? Well, firstly, there's the relentless growth in cloud adoption. And actually talking to a lot of our customers, they're going through a second phase of cloud adoption, which is actually changing and increasing their exposure in their environments. They've gone through that initial lift and shift where they've taken their on-premise IT and they've moved it into the cloud, as that's the trend they've gone through. But now actually they're looking to how can we take advantage of the cloud-native benefits and actually building cloud-native infrastructure to be not just cloud first, but cloud only as they go. And actually Brian is going to talk through exposure in a lot more detail next, so I won't run over his slides too much, but he'll go into the detail on how that's changed and what the impact is and how we need to think about exposure overall. Shadow IT is another challenge that customers are reporting on a regular basis, that actually business units now are looking actually to go and make investments in services, particularly SaaS services they can use, and that is data walking out of the organization. So how do we get visibility of that? How do we control it? Another point of exposure. Legacy platforms is another one. And actually, when I sit down a little bit later with Patrick Ragg, and we're going to go through some of our IR examples and insights of things we've responded to, this comes up over and over again. So still a thorn in our side that's causing a problem and exposing us to attackers and exposing our data and our systems. And then lastly is the growth in vulnerabilities. As I say, Brian's got a lot more information on this. But one of the things I will just call out is that the narrow view that we have on vulnerabilities being CVEs only, and that needs to broaden hugely. And again, Brian's going to walk us through that. So as a result, what we find ourselves with when it comes to exposure is either having an unknown or intangible amount of exposure that we just don't have an idea about, or if we do have an idea about it, we end up in a position where our exposure is huge. We don't understand what we need to prioritize and how we're going to patch and how we're going to get to the point of remediation. So that's exposure. Hot topic number 2, resilience. It goes hand in hand with exposure. And I got another definition here. The last one was from Oxford. I've shared it out. We've gone for the Cambridge Dictionary definition for resilience here. So the capacity to withstand difficulties. So really talking about toughness. And then secondly, the quality of being able to return quickly from a previously good condition after problems. So both of those we see as being critically important. So very different definitions there of what resilience means, but all about building organizational resilience, so our organizations and our IT infrastructure and our systems and applications resilient to attack, and importantly, being able to bounce back when that happens. If we go back to that security first model, it's about how do we prevent it from happening in the first place, so being resilient, but also how do we ensure that we're able to detect and then respond quickly and recover, which is critically important. And again, when we go through that with Patrick, we'll see actually how quickly things can escalate and actually what the right things to do are to make sure that any incident is contained and responded to minimize business impact. So just on resilience, as I say, resilience is hugely important for us. We need to make sure that we are building resilience into our organization. There's actually a people element to that as well, building resilience into our people, making sure they are part of the solution, not part of the problem. I think there's another piece of resilience as well, which I think all of us as IT security professionals feel, of that pressure of continuing threats, continuing changing, that we need to also manage our people to make sure that they have the resilience and we don't get to the point of burnout. But the important things that we need to do, and sorry, a lot of this is also being driven by regulation. So very much EU regulations, but some of them are in UK law, but also affecting businesses widely that are operating within Europe. So DORA and NIS2 being directives, and they are specifically set to call out to build resilience into IT systems to ensure that organizations can continue to operate under attack, but also can respond and recover quickly. And the three main points that we need to focus on here is architecting resilience resilience to attacks into our infrastructure, into our processes. So again, when we sit down with Nick during his panel, they're going to look at how we build that resilience in from a detection and response point of view. So how can we prevent, respond, and recover as quickly as possible? We need to minimize the impacts that we're seeing, impacts of incidents in the environment. So when an incident hits, how can we close that out as quick as possible? So again, we'll touch upon that with Patrick Ragg and again with Nick and others. And also with Darktrace as well, actually, when we go through their AI approach to threat detection and mitigation. And then lastly, having a clear and tested path to recovery. And that's, again, critically important that when things do happen, that we have the path, we understand what we're going to do, so we can execute upon that very quickly and clearly to make sure that we're minimizing the impact and we can recover as quick as possible. And then the last topic is around the impact of AI, or the AI impact that it's going to have on our industry and on our organizations. And I think this kind of sums it up for me, really. There is a big gulf between the hype that we see at the moment, which I think is huge. We're actually at the peak hype, and we'll come on to that in a second. The hope that we have for it, that again, may